Hey guys, welcome back. So I wanted to touch upon what we were gonna do, and that's why we have a picture of a kitten here, and he does this little rollover thing. Let me explain. So when we were discussing the internal layout, I think last week, we talked about the possibility of having these little thumbnail images of the different animals up in the top of the menu. So we're gonna put this thing on the internal page. Now where we've gotten to is here, so we have this home thing which is hidden, which we still need to fix. We need to put a white bar in, and we were talking about having some little circle images there. So I had to play and basically wanted to show you some things that we can do in HTML without having to really create all of these extra graphics for the little thing, and also to show you how you can animate some little transition things like that. But if we start with what you know, then we have to take away this SVG thing, and that's the picture of a kitten that we have. So that's the whole square and nothing but the square, right? We're loading that if it's a media case, so I just googled that image. If it was your image, it would just be kitten.jpg. But in this case, we're loading it off the internet, so we're grabbing it. And then we're adding this thing here, which is basically a clipping mask. If you want to learn more about clipping masks, go to the clipping masks page. I'm going to put the link below anyway, but this explains the different versions of clipping masks that you can have. It's a very long read, but basically there's a portion in there which uses SVG Clipping Paths, and this is what we're using here, and we're specifying how big the radius of the circle is, and obviously where the circle starts as well. So if we wanted to offset the circle, so let's say make it smaller, let's just make it 50 by 50, and we wanted to start it off over here, you can see it's clipping a different portion of it. So it's pretty much the same as masking in Photoshop, but what we're doing differently here is we're telling the CSS and the HTML to do that. Now this is just HTML. This is defining how big the mask is. And then you need to go into your CSS and you actually need to go and apply the clipping mask. So you're saying, look, there's a clipping mask within the page which I've called circle clip path. That name is defined here. So you could call this balloon, and then as long as you name the same thing in the CSS, it will match and it will work. The hash just tells it that it's within the page. So your clip path is applied. If you delete that, you'll see that the clip path disappears. The other bits and pieces here tell us how big the image is. So in this case, we've got the ability to make that smaller. The clipping path will still clip a portion of that, but it's not what we want. And if we make the image bigger, then we're just seeing a piece of the kitten's ear. So all those things kind of get set here in terms of what the default is for that image. This filter here makes it grayscale, and if I take that out, it's going to be full color when it loads. And then this opacity here also does some stuff to it. So let me just kind of show you. But when I've also got the JavaScript which has already set it. So these things are just initial states of what I want this to be. And then there's this magic layer which we haven't ever talked about, which is JavaScript. And this particular JavaScript actually uses this thing called tweenmax, so I've actually included it in the settings. So that's the whole kind of URL for that, but I'll explain that another day. What I just want you to be aware of is what's possible, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. So the filter that you saw in terms of the CSS, in terms of the opacity and the not the saturation, but the grayscale effect, are filters that you can read about here. Again, I'll put that link in. There's a bunch of filters that you can use, blur, contrast, all of these other things that you can do. And when they're applied with JavaScript, you can modify them and actually animate between the different states. So here we're animating from a grayscale of 0 to a grayscale of 1, which is 0% to 100%. If I click it, it highlights it blue. And then what you do here with the opacity is you decide what the opacity is. Now if I took opacity out, then it will always be full opacity if it updates. Sorry. Doing great here. Oh, come on. Deselect. So that'll always be the full opacity here. And then we've got that grayscale effect on top of it. But I think with a little bit of a opacity change like that, it would be fun. And it defaulted back to the 0.7 because my CSS was set to 0.7. So if I had that set to 1, and then I took out the opacity here in the JavaScript, then you'll see it defaults back to 1. So it's just a grayscale effect now that we've got going on. But I don't think that's as clever, so we've just put opacity in as well, the default value here being the same so that they match, otherwise you're going to get weird flickering. So if you put like 0.6 here and you got 0.7 there, it'll just be weird. What 0.7 means is 70%, but 70% doesn't work. You get an error message. So what you need to do is just put in 0.7 to get the same kind of result. Filter is what you're modifying. So if you're looking at that filter CSS tricks explanation, that's what you're saying. And then grayscale is one of the filters that you can apply. This is the speed of which the transition actually happens. If I change this from 0.2 of a second to 2 seconds, what you're seeing is a much slower transition between these two things. So you decide how quickly or how slowly you want this to happen, and basically mess around with it. Remember, you're going to get the link to this, so you can go in here and just mess with these little numbers. The rest of it is there to hook it up so that it works. These are the details for the on mouse over, which means when the mouse is hovering. This is when the mouse leaves. So when you go over, something happens. When you leave, something happens. This is the tween max. This tells it what to do. The K represents the kitten. We tell it that the K represents a kitten by the top bit. And then we specify all these different values that we can actually modify and change. So between these things, you've got a fully functioning kind of rollover effect, which we can use. It is minimal in terms of what we've done, but it does use this thing called the Greensock tweening engine. And if you want to read more about that, go to their official website, check it out. There's heaps of stuff that explains it there. But that's basically this whole JavaScript bit at the bottom. So yeah, let me know if you like this, if you actually want us to put this in, and then what I'll do is I'll actually go back to this page that we have here, and I'll copy out all of the bits and pieces that we have messed around with in here, and I'll show you how to integrate that. The reason I do it in something like CodePen is because I want to test out a specific feature in isolation, and if it works well, then I can implement it back into the main website that I'm trying to build, or a specific page. It's much safer this way because I'm only dealing with one thing, in this particular instance the kitten image, and as a result of that, if I do get it right, then I know that's a functional piece of code, and then all I need to figure out is where do these bits and pieces go back in my main page. And so it becomes more manageable from that point of view. And the reason you might want to try this kind of process as well for yourself is that it just keeps you sane. You don't have to worry that you broke something else in the page, or that what you're trying to achieve is basically impossible, and that's because you put something in the wrong spot. And it also clearly kind of gives you a way to share this with someone else. So if you wanted to and you got stuck, you could send someone a link to this CodePen and say, I'm trying to achieve this, for whatever reason this isn't happening, can you have a look at my code and fix it? And again, in isolation as a specific thing, it can be worked on and solved easily that way. So it's just a bit of a segue, some talking about clipping masks, filters, and the Greensock engine, which is amazing, and it's been around for like 12 years. The JavaScript version's a little bit less than that, but they've been amazing at working at that. And if you want to get more into it, it just means that you can start to animate and do a lot of cool little things as well that you might not otherwise do. But generally what I want you to go in here and do is mess around with some of these values to see that it's not as scary. If you want to swap out the image, just Google another image and put it in there, and then maybe mess around with the clipping path to make sure that the circle's where you want it to be. Obviously, if you wanted to move it a little bit over to the, like if I put this to 120, you know, it just shifts it over a little bit over that way. But then it's a little bit too big, so I can make this 80, and then I can move it up by saying, you know, 90. I think that's a little bit too much. And you can just get a little bit closer on the actual kitten. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you want us to use this for the actual Amazing Animals page. And if you've got any questions, you know, go check that out and then let me know as well. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye.